I think it's common knowledge in the world of politics that conservatives are fucking horrible at spreading their message to the youth. I didn't realize how clueless they were until a week ago when I saw their takes on the whole MAGA riot that occurred.
This isn't even about him. He was offering something that everybody wanted, PlayStations. Scott Baio could have came back today and went to and said, I'm going to give away PlayStations, computers. Downtown, the same mob would have showed up. That's the thing. It's not him.
I mean, first off, you list off the most irrelevant person ever. Scott Baio? Who the fuck is Scott Baio? Secondly, the only reason people knew to go to Union Square for PS5s, for all the gaming shit, was because they followed Kai Cenat. Like, if he made the claim that some people were there just for the PlayStations, or certain people who were in the crowd were only there because they saw a crowd, then yeah, I'd agree with that. But this idea of, like, if it was another influencer, it would have been as big. It's like, no, it wouldn't have. Do you even know what the fuck you're talking about? Now, even though I'm young and had to sit through that idiocy, I still do stick by my past stances, which is that the youth is starting to lean more conservative. Now, this is something that I've talked about a lot, and I do that for a number of reasons. I mean, for one, I am a part of this generation. I have a personal experience. But number two, which I think is more important, is that there seems to be a big misunderstanding about the youth. You see, when you watch the Young Turks, they seem to be very giddy about the youth. They seem to be very excited about them because they all think they're progressive.
They know they've lost the young 100% and they're in a full-scale panic. And this is a direct attack on democracy to try to regain power because they don't give a damn about democracy. And young people, you should be super excited. You know why? Because they're scared of you.
And the reason they believe that the youth is progressive is because the youth is very anti-establishment. We see the bullshit. We're into conspiracy theories. We're into the people that we're not supposed to be into. But here's where the confusion is, in my opinion. Being anti-establishment is a progressive thing. But it's not just a progressive thing. It is also a MAGA right thing. And to the youth, the face of the MAGA movement is pretty fucking cool. Now, I've done this number a few times on this channel, but I'm gonna do it again because it fucking works. When you think about the people that Joe Biden's hanging out with, what are the names? Cardi B, Jennifer Lopez, Olivia Rodrigo, Lady Gaga, fucking Dylan Mulvaney. Now, those names aren't horrible. Some of them are pretty big superstars. But take those names and compare them to who Trump hangs out with. He's going to fucking UFC events with Mike Tyson and Kid Rock while inviting Kanye West to the fucking White House. Pardoning A$AP Rocky, Kodak Black, Lil Wayne, which gained the respect from street rappers. I mean, YG, who's a pretty respected street rapper, who back in the day made the biggest fuck Trump song ever.
Fuck Donald Trump. Yeah, nigga, fuck Donald Trump. Yeah, fuck Donald Trump.
Fast forward today and he's like, yeah, Trump's pretty cool.
I'm speaking on the motherfuckers in the hood and shit in the streets. I'm speaking on their behalf. You feel me? Let them tell it. You feel me? This is what they say.
Yeah.
Shit. Biden ain't did nothing for us. That nigga Trump was passing out money. We fuck with Trump. I'm like, damn, so y'all back with Trump just like that, huh? niggas like, hell yeah, nigga passing out money.
But that's just the names. The huge factor that is really taking place is that when Trump hangs out with these celebrities, he's actually hanging out with them. When Biden does it, we all know it's staged. We all know it's for votes. Like, Trump is actually calling Colby Covington to congratulate him on his win because he likes MMA.
You are a great fighter, man. I'll tell you. You make it so easy. I don't know how the hell you do that. Congratulations. I wanted to watch that fight tonight. I wanted to watch it. You were great.
I mean, even to this day, Trump still finds himself connected to big names. The prosecutor from Georgia, Fani Willis, who's about to hit Trump with a 4th indictment, is the same prosecutor who went after popular artists Gunna and Young Thug. And all that does is causes our culture, our world, to crash into Trump's world. And the aftermath is, we fuck with Trump.
The Hill has this startling headline, startling for them anyway. High school boys are trending conservative. Oh no, dear God. A popular narrative suggests young people, are reading now from the article, are liberal and getting more liberal. Thus, social media buzzed when a chat surfaced in spring that seemed to suggest 12th grade boys have become overwhelmingly conservative. As with many Reddit posts and viral tweets, the tweet was more complicated. The truth was more complicated, but the numbers do say this. 12th grade boys are nearly twice as likely to identify as conservative versus liberal, according to a respected federal survey of American youth. In annual surveys over the last 3 years, roughly 1/4 of high school seniors self-identified as conservative or very conservative on the Monitoring the Future survey, a scholarly endeavor that dates to the 1970s. Only 13% of boys identified as liberal or very liberal in those years. The figures represent a striking shift in the political views of boys. As recently as the late 2000s, liberal boys occasionally outnumbered conservatives. Back in the Carter era, both boys and girls leaned liberal. Nowadays, it's girls who are drifting to the left. The share of 12th grade girls who identified as liberal rose from 19% in 2012 to 30% in 2022.
I'd say so far this all makes sense. I mean, one big thing that clearly has changed is the definition of liberal. Like back then, I imagine it was kind of the new modern way of thinking, so of course the youth got into it. But now, since it's been around for a while, it's getting old. Not only that though, it's also being associated to the pussy shit. Like, am I supposed to think LGBTQ people are cool? Am I supposed to be jumping out of my seat when healthcare is for all? Like, am I meant to be excited by any of their ideas? Because I'm not. Like, liberalism has just turned into this big cry fest of like, oh my god, you're using the wrong pronouns. Nobody thinks that's cool. No one sees that and thinks that's the thing to get behind. Like, when we see that occurring, we don't think this is something to get behind. We see this and we're like, this is pathetic and sad, and honestly, it's just straight up pussy.
12% of girls identified as conservative in the last year's survey administered by the University of Michigan. Young women, too, are trending liberal. Women ages 18 to 29 are more likely to identify as liberal now than at any time in the past 2 decades, according to Gallup surveys. Young women are also almost twice as likely as young men to claim the liberal tag, a widening gender gap in political beliefs. So that's kind of the headline. That you've got overall.
I agree with that. I mean, from my view, pretty much makes sense. Yeah, I mean, the guys seem to be more conservative. My girlfriend, I think, is... I don't know what she is, honestly. I mean, she likes Trump over Biden. That's all I'm going to say with that.
Young men and boys are trending conservative. And when you narrow it down to 12th grade boys, they're twice as likely to identify as conservative versus liberal, which is a striking difference from the past, as they point out. Now, I think there are a few things happening here. A few reasons why teenage boys and young men are increasingly becoming conservative. And the first is that conservatism is rebellious, okay? It's edgy, it's offensive in our culture. By our culture standards, it's
true.
The rebellious, edgy, offensive thing.
Like, I'm sorry to say this, I'm sorry to be the one to say this, but Trump being indicted is kind of cool. It's kind of cool. It's like detention. When you were a kid, no one was like, oh no, you don't want to be the kid who gets detention. It's like, no, they're fine. They're the popular ones. Who gives a shit? I agree with this point 100%.
And if you have that kind of renegade instinct, that desire to rebel, as many young people do, especially boys, then this is where you go. As I pointed out before, if you're a kid in high school and you want to be edgy and cool, you can't do that by adopting the same position as your middle-aged math teacher. Like, the moment that your math teacher starts waving a pride flag and talking about how the Bible is evil is the moment that it becomes extremely uncool to love the pride flag and hate the Bible. This drives towards, there's a drive among the youth, obviously, towards rebellion. That's not news to anybody. And historically, it's been harnessed by the left against the right. And that's the reason why, if you go back, as they point out, you go back to the 60s and 70s.
I mean, obviously, conservatism is kind of like the boomer thing. It's kind of something that I believe you age into. But I mean, I exist for a reason. I am a conservative for a reason. I mean, for multiple other reasons. But I mean, the main one is because the people I like are conservative too. And I literally mean that. Like, growing up, my parents fucking hate Trump. And obviously they're my parents, so I was like, oh, well, okay, and I kind of went along. But then I see my favorite artist, Ye, hanging out with the guy, and it's like, wait, what? I'm supposed to hate this guy. And so I did some research, I got really into it, and at the end, I was like, yeah, I kind of like this guy. And I think that's a story that a lot of people of my generation share, especially when it comes to people of color.
You're going to find that the situation is completely reversed, where young boys are much more likely to identify as liberal versus conservative. That's because that was the rebellious thing at the time. For a long time, you know, what we consider now to be conservative ideals were the popular mainstream ideals. The conservative position, as we consider it now, was the dominant cultural position, which is not the case anymore. Which means the left is in control. It means they're the dominant cultural force, which is bad. But the good thing is that they lose their rebel status. That's the one good thing. Even if they pretend to still have it, which they do, so you end up with like aging punk rockers still going out and pretending to rage against the machine by saying everything that your HR rep at work would say. But it's all a charade, and kids for the most part see right through it. So this is a great advantage for us that we should be harnessing much more than we are. And you have to harness it in a smart way, obviously. I mean, you can't actually go up to kids and say, hey, kids, want to be edgy and cool? Be conservative. You can't say it as, in a way as on the nose as that, because that makes it sound lame. But that is basically the message and the truth. Conservatism is edgy. It's much cooler. And partly because it's the only place where you can have a sense of humor. And that's the other thing about teenage boys. And I know this from having been one not that long ago. Well, pretty long ago. I mean,
Bro,
really
you know how many times I played video games and like the biggest slurs, just the most insane shit has been said? And it's like, would you rather do all that and be associated with a group that's like, yeah, sure, go ahead. I don't really care. I think it's a little disgusting, but I don't care. Or would you rather be associated with the group that's like, hey, don't say that, it's offensive? It's always clear who wins in that battle.
Long ago, but still, I was one at one time. And I can still remember that as a teenage boy, you have a very outrageous, offensive, kind of morbid, aggressive sense of humor. Teenage boys amused themselves by insulting each other, like among friends, just insulting each other in extremely vulgar and personal ways. And to some extent, you never grow out of that. Yeah, even as you become a man, as men, we never quite grow out of that. We still think it's funny to like make fun of each other and stuff. But there's no room for that on the left at all. I mean, you cannot have a man's sense of humor on the left. You just can't. In fact, as it turns out, you can't have a man's sense of anything on the left. You cannot be a man on the left. Which brings us to the second factor, which could explain why boys are increasingly becoming conservative, which is that the left, if you are a high school boy, the left is doing nothing but heaping scorn and contempt on you. Telling you to be ashamed of yourself, of your masculinity, calling you toxic, lecturing you, scolding you, yelling at you.
I agree.
On and on and on, a constant, never-ending harangue. Another difference between now and back then in the 60s and 70s. It used to be that when you thought of the humorless scolds, what immediately comes to mind is like the church lady, right? The conservative, you're thinking of conservatives, so it's supposed to be these humorless scolds, don't have a sense of humor, they're offended by everything, writing angry letters because they're offended by this and that. That's the left, that's what the left does. That's their gig. And they're very excited to explain to you why everything you think and say is offensive, especially if you're a male. So what else if you're a teenage boy, what else are you going to do? You've got these people over here who hate you and don't even disguise their contempt. And meanwhile, they're on the other end of it, they're doing nothing but heaping praise and adulation and celebration for like every other group. They're constantly saying, oh, you're so special, you're great, you're wonderful, you should be accepted exactly as you are. Everything about you is perfect, you're the most wonderful thing on the planet. That's their message to everyone. But then they turn around to you and say, oh, you scumbags. Why don't you be more like them?
Yeah, and this obviously goes into like why Tate is popular, why people like Jordan Peterson are popular. Like, I genuinely believe that the left is losing its grip on the culture. Like, they're pushing this weird, like, over-controlled type society. It's like, no, don't tell me what to do. Like, this is a grave that they just built themselves because of how retarded their ideas are.
Except you can't be more like them because that'd be appropriation. And I think teenage boys hear that and they respond exactly as you would expect them to.
Fuck you.
Which means that, again, on the right, the goal here is to harness this to our advantage, and ultimately the advantage of the culture and truth. Because the really good thing is that in this case, it's not just that going over to the right is now rebellious and edgy and all the rest of it. But that's also where the truth is on all these issues.
I agree.
When we see these, what I find.
And at the end of the day, people like the truth. Like, it's not even just like age or like gender type question. It's just like a human being type of thing. People want the truth. People want genuine shit. And this touches back to my argument with Trump, where it's like, Trump is genuinely hanging out with these people. And we can tell that he is. And then with Biden, it's just so painstakingly obvious that it's scripted, that it's just brain candy and it's boring.
And to be extremely encouraging videos of, again, high school boys, tearing down the pride flags and mocking attempts by schools to, groom them into the LGBT cult. And these videos come out, very encouraging. But it's not just because it's politically advantageous for us. It's because what they are rejecting falsehood in favor of the truth. And the question is, how are we going to harness that on the right? And there hasn't been nearly enough of that. Thanks for checking out this video.
Yeah, and this is also just goes down to also like, say all these people, the youth, they're conservative, right? And it's like, who do you want for president? Well, who's like DeSantis hanging out with? Who's fucking Nikki Haley hanging out with? Who's Tim Scott hanging out with? No one. But Trump, he's hanging out with the people that he likes and that we like, which is a connection, which is something that we can have in common with the fucking president of the United States. It's just cool. That's all it is. And it's like, this really shows how much of a gap there is between Trump and any other politician. Like, to me, what has happened is that the left has just given the biggest setup for the biggest dunk ever. Their messaging, dog shit. Their person for the symbol of their movement is literally an old man. Ooh, but Trump's old too. You know what I mean? You can see the difference between the two. You can like hear the difference between the two. Like even trans people, it's like we got the cooler one. We got a fucking Kardashian on our side. The only thing that I can think of that's like kind of cool is the fact that like Obama drops a list of like his favorite rap songs or something. But that's really it. And that's something that occurs like once every year. And even then I'm like sort of interested. I really don't care. Honestly, I just don't see this going anywhere good. And of course the argument could be like, well, what about after Trump? Who do they have next? It's like, first off, you're probably gonna get a Trump endorsement. I also believe Tucker Carlson will run in 28, who is someone who has hung out with Ye, who talks about conspiracy theories, which is something cool. But it's also like, once Trump leaves, there's still a whole movement there. I do believe the MAGA movement will continue to be a thing way past Trump. And again, it's like, I'll ask the same question for the leftist. Who do they have? I could really go on and on with shitting with the left, but I'll leave you with this prediction. I 100% believe that Georgia will become a red state in 2024. Because I remember back in 2020, it was cool to say, fuck Trump. And when I saw that people were questioning if Georgia would be red or blue, I instantly knew. Georgia's gonna be blue. And I was right. And so for this prediction, I'm very, very confident in it. Come back in a year or more and we'll see. We'll see if I'm right or not.